Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are continuing in Life with Father by Clarence Day. This story is entitled Father Lets in the Telephone. And with that, I'll get started. Up to the late 1890s, when Father walked in the front door of his home and closed it behind him, he shut out the world. Telephones had been invented, but like most people, he hadn't installed one. There was no way for anybody to get at us except by climbing up the front stoop and ringing the bell. And if the bell rang late at night, Father looked out of the window to see who it was. He thought nothing of this. Homes had always been shut off since men began building them, and it seemed only natural. Once in a long while, a messenger boy would bring him or mother a telegram, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. As this generally meant bad news, we were nervous about getting telegrams. No telegraph poles were allowed on Fifth Avenue, but they stood in long rows on other thoroughfares. Old Margaret was mystified by all those wires up in the air. We had wires in our house, to be sure. They had been strung inside the walls to ring bells with, but they were good, honest, old-fashioned wires, and to make them work we had to pull them. There was none of this dangerous stuff called electricity in them. Electricity was much too risky a thing to put in a home, and neither we boys nor Margaret could make out what it was. All we knew about it was that there were electric batteries in the Eden Musée which could and did give anyone who paid 25 cents a shock. You were supposed to give yourself as big a shock as you could stand. We had been cautious in trying them, except George, who had had a startling experience. He had taken hold of one end of the thing in his right hand and moved it way up till the indicator pointed to far more current than the rest of us had been able to stand, and yet he stood there at ease for a while as though he were completely immune. Then the lady in charge noticed that George hadn't taken the other end in his left hand at all. He hadn't understood that he ought to. When she told him that the way to feel the current was to hold one end in each hand, he immediately seized the left hand one without lowering the right from its height. It was grandly exciting to the rest of us to see how violently this shook him up, and how the lady screamed until attendants rushed over and managed to shut off the current. After a while, the telegraph company persuaded Father to let them install a brand new invention just inside of one of our back bedroom windows, where it couldn't do any harm. This was a small metal box with a handle. A wire led from it which was connected with a telegraph pole, but although there was some electricity in it, there was only a little, and the company guaranteed it was safe. The handle was made to look like those on the pull bells which we were used to. When we pulled it, the box began to buzz, and somehow that sent a signal to the nearest telegraph office, where a row of little messenger boys was supposed to be waiting. The office then sent a boy to our house ready to run any errand. This quote-unquote buzzer, as we called it, seemed almost as remarkable to us as that lamp of Aladdin's. By giving some extra pulls on it and making it buzz enough times, the directions said a policeman could be summoned or even a fire engine. How long it would have taken for a policeman to come we never had occasion to learn. It took a messenger boy from 20 to 45 minutes. That is, if we were lucky. The branch office was nearly a mile away, and had only one little bench full of boys. If the boys were all out when we buzzed for one, the manager had no way to tell us. We might be impatient. He wasn't. He peacefully waited till some boy got through other errands. On stormy days sometimes, when a friend wished to send us a message or break an engagement, a messenger would surprise us by coming without being buzzed for. He stood outside the front door with a black rubber hood dripping with rain hanging down from his cap, blowing on his cold fingers and stamping and ringing away at the bell. And when one of us opened the door, the boy would thrust in a wet letter and hoarsely ask us to sign the name and the hour on a small smudgy slip. All these delays were more or less put up with, however. There was no other service to turn to. And anyway, people seldom used messengers. They were not only slow, but expensive. We ran our own errands. When the telephone was invented and was ready to use, hardly anybody cared to install one. We all stuck to our buzzers. Messenger boys were quite enough of a nuisance. suddenly appearing at the door with a letter and expecting an answer. But they came only a few times a year, and a telephone might ring every week. People admitted that telephones were ingenious contraptions and wondered just how they worked, but they no more thought of getting one than of buying a balloon or a diving suit. As a matter of fact, for a long time they were of little use in a home. Since almost nobody had them but brokers, there was no one to talk to. The telephone companies sent us circulars in which they made large claims. They said that an important department store now had a telephone, and 3 banks had ordered one apiece, and some enterprising doctors were getting them. But though people saw vaguely that a telephone might be a convenience if every household installed one, they decided to wait in a body until everyone did. Father had to have one downtown, but he wouldn't use it himself. He had had it put in the back office, where the bookkeeper dealt with it, bringing Father the message if necessary. The typewriter and a gelatine hectograph were in the back office too, but the idea of putting these business conveniences in a home seemed absurd. Mother agreed with Father. She didn't like telephones either. She distrusted machines of all kinds. They weren't human. They popped or exploded and made her nervous. She never knew what they might do to her, and the telephone seemed to her and many other people especially dangerous. They were afraid that if they stood near one in a thunderstorm, they might get hit by lightning. If there wasn't any storm, the electric wiring might give them a shock. When they saw a telephone in some hotel or office, they stood away from it or picked it up gingerly. It was a freak way to use electricity, and Mother wouldn't even touch the queer toy. Besides, she said, she had to see the face of any person she talked to. She didn't want to be answered by a voice coming out of a box on the wall. Little by little, however, and year by year, telephones came into use. Some of the large markets and groceries installed them. The livery stable, some druggists, and once in a while when Father had a bad cold and couldn't go to the office, he saw it would be a business convenience to have one at home. After 10 or 15 years, in spite of his still having misgivings, he got one. It was put on a wall on the 2nd floor where everybody could hear its loud bell. We didn't give it much of a welcome. It seemed to us rude and intrusive, and from the first it made trouble. It rang seldom, but it always chose a bad moment when there was nobody on the floor to answer. Mother would pick up her skirts and run upstairs, calling it loudly, "I'm coming! I'm coming!" But the fretful thing kept right on ringing. Father couldn't regard it as inanimate either. He refused to be hurried like Mother, but he scolded and cursed it. The outer world now began intruding upon us at will. This was hard to get used to. Even Mother felt there was too much of it. As for Father, he met these invasions with ferocious resentment. When somebody telephoned him and he couldn't make out at once who it was, and when there was nothing he could shake his fist at but a little black receiver which was squeaking at him, he said it was horrible. Speak up, damn it," he would shout at the telephone, getting red in the face. "What is it? Who are you? I can't hear a word you are saying. I can't hear a damned word, I tell you." "Claire, give me that telephone," Mother would cry, rushing in. "I will not give you this telephone," Father would roar in reply without taking his lips from the transmitter. "Will you let me alone? I am trying to find out who the devil this person is. Hello? I say hello there, do you hear me? Who are you? Hello? What's that? Oh, it's you, Mrs. Nicholas." Here his voice would grow a little less forbidding, and sometimes even friendly. "Yes, Mrs. Day's here. How are you?" "Oh, do you wish to speak to Mrs. Day? Eh? Very well then, wait a moment." And he would at last allow Mother to get at the box on the wall. When Father called a number himself, he usually got angry at quote-unquote Central. He said she was deaf, she was stupid. He told her she wasn't attending to her duties in a suitable manner. If she said a number was busy, he'd protest. "I can't sit here waiting all day. Busy? Busy be damned." He always assumed when the bell rang that it was a message for him. The idea that it might be a call for Mother or any of the rest of us seemed wholly improbable. If he let anyone but himself answer, he would keep calling out and asking who it was and what it was all about anyhow, while we tried in the midst of his shouts to hear some of the message. When we said it was something that didn't concern him, he was incredulous and had to have it explained to make sure. One day, a new friend of mine, a girl who had moved down in a settlement house in the slums, telephoned to invite me to lunch with some visiting Russians. Father answered the telephone. "Yes, this is Mr. Day." "Speak up, Hingett." "Don't mumble at me. Who are you?" "What?" "Come to lunch." "I've had lunch." "Next Friday?" "Why, I don't want lunch with you next Friday, no." "Where?" "Where do you say?" "In Rivington Street, the devil." "Yes, my name is Clarence Day, and I told you that before. Don't repeat." "Lunch with you in Rivington Street? Good God, I never heard of such a thing in my life." "Russians? I don't know any Russians." "No, I don't want to either." "No, I haven't changed. I never change." "What?" "Goodbye, madame. Damn." "I think that was a friend of mine, Father," I said. "A friend of yours?" he exclaimed. "Why, it sounded to me like some impudent peddler's wife this time, arguing with me about lunching with her somewhere down in the slums. I can't stand it, that's all I have to say. I'll have the confounded thing taken out." Father isn't much help. In Father's childhood, it was unusual for boys to take music lessons, and his father hadn't had him taught music. Men didn't play the piano. Young ladies learned to play pretty things on it as an accomplishment, but few of them went further, and any desire to play classical music was rare. After Father grew up, however, and began to do well in his business, he decided that music was one of the good things of life. He bought himself a piano and paid a musician to teach him. He took no interest in the languishing love songs which were popular then. He didn't admire patriotic things such as Marching Through Georgia, and he had a hearty distaste for songs of pathos. He always swore if he heard them. He enjoyed music as he did a fine wine or a good ride on horseback. The people he associated with didn't care much for this kind of thing, and Father didn't wish to associate with the long-haired musicians who did. He got no encouragement from anyone, and his progress was lonely. But Father was not the kind of man who depends on encouragement. He had long muscular fingers, he practiced faithfully, and he learned to the best of his ability to play Beethoven and Bach. His feeling for music was limited, but it was rather deeply rooted, and he cared enough for it to keep on practicing even after he married and in the busy years when he was providing for a house full of boys. He didn't go to symphonic concerts, and he never liked Wagner, but he did hum something of Brahms while posting his ledger, or play Mozart or Chopin after dinner. It gave him a sense of well-being. Mother liked music too. We often heard her sweet voice gently singing old songs of an evening. If she forgot parts here or there, she swiftly improvised something that would let the air flow along without breaking the spell. Father didn't play that way. He was erecting much statelier structures, and when he got a chord wrong, he stopped. He took that chord apart and went over the notes one by one, and he kept on going over them methodically. This sometimes drove Mother mad. She would desperately cry, "Oh, oh, oh," and run out of the room. Her whole attitude towards music was different. She didn't get a solid and purely personal enjoyment from it like Father. It was more of a social function to her. It went with dancing and singing. She played and sang for fun, or to keep from being sad, or to give others pleasure. On Thursday afternoons in winter, Mother was always at home. She served tea and cakes, and quite a few people dropped in to see her. She liked entertaining, and whenever she saw a way to make her Thursdays more attractive, she tried it. About this time, Mother's favorite niece, Cousin Julie, was duly quote-unquote finished at boarding school and came to live with us, bringing her trunks and hat boxes and a great gilded harp. Mother at once made room for this beautiful object in our crowded parlor, and the first thing Julie knew, she had to play it for the Thursday afternoon visitors. Julie loved her harp dearly, but she didn't like performing at all. Performances frightened her, and if she fumbled a bit, she felt badly. But Mother said she must get over all that. She tried to give Julie self-confidence. She talked to her like a determined though kind impresario. These afternoon sessions were pleasant, but they made Mother want to do more. While she was thinking one evening about what a lot of social debt she must pay, she suddenly said to Father, who was reading Gibbon, half asleep by the fire, "Why not give a musicale, Claire, instead of a series of dinners?" When Father was able to understand what she was talking about, he said he was glad if she had come to her senses sufficiently to give up any wild idea of having a series of dinners, and that she had better by all means give up musicales too. He informed her that he was not made of money, and all good string quartets were expensive, and when Mother interrupted him, he raised his voice and said, to close the discussion, "I will not have my peaceful home turned into a Roman arena, with a lot of hairy fiddlers prancing about and disturbing my comfort." "You needn't get so excited, Claire," Mother said. "I didn't say a word about hairy fiddlers. I don't know where you get such ideas. But I do know a lovely young girl whom Mrs. Spiller has had, and she'll come for very little, I'm sure." "What instrument does this inexpensive paragon play?" Father inquired sardonically. She doesn't play, Claire. She whistles." "Whistles?" said Father. "Good God!" "Very well, then," Mother said after an argument. "I'll have to have Julie instead, and Miss Craigman can help her, and try to get Sally Brown or somebody to play the piano." "Miss Craigman!" Father snorted. "I wash my hands of the whole business." Mother asked nothing better. She could have made a grander affair of it if she had provided the money, but even with only a little to spend, getting up a party was fun. Before her marriage, she had loved her brother Alden's musicales. She would model hers upon those. Hers would be different in one way, for Uncle Alden had had famous artists, and at hers the famous artist would be impersonated by Cousin Julie. But the question as to how expert the music would be didn't bother her, and she didn't think it would bother the guests whom she planned to invite. The flowers would be pretty. She knew just what she would put in each vase. The parlor was full of large vases. She had a special kind of little cakes in mind, and everybody would enjoy it all thoroughly. But no matter what kind of artist she has, a hostess is bound to have trouble managing them, and Mother knew that even her homemade material would need a firm hand. Julie was devoted to her, and so was the other victim, Sally Brown, Julie's schoolmate. But devoted or not, they were uneasy about this experiment. Sally would rather have done almost anything than perform at a musicale, and the idea of playing in public sent cold chills down Julie's back. The only one Mother worried about, however, was Julie's teacher, Miss Craigman. She could bring a harp of her own, so she would be quite an addition, but Mother didn't feel she was decorative. She was an angular, plain-looking woman, and she certainly was a very unromantic sight at a harp. Father didn't feel she was decorative either, and said, "I'll be hanged if I come." He said musicales were all poppycock anyway. "Nothing but tinkle and twitter." "Nobody's invited you, Claire," Mother said defiantly. As a matter of fact, she felt relieved by his announcement. This wasn't like a dinner, where she wanted Father and where he would be of some use. She didn't want him at all at her musicale. "All I ask is," she went on, "that you will please dine out for once. It won't be over until 6 at the earliest, and it would make things much easier for me if you would dine at the club." Father said that was ridiculous. "I never dine at the club. I won't do it. Any time I can't have my dinner in my own home, this house is for sale. I disapprove entirely of these parties and uproar." He shouted, "I'm ready to sell the place at this very minute if I can't live here in peace, and we can all go and sit under a palm tree and live on bread, fruit, and pickles." On the day of the musicale, it began to snow while we were at breakfast. Father had forgotten what day it was, of course, and he didn't care anyhow. His mind was on a waistcoat, which he wished Mother to take to his tailor's. To his astonishment, he found her standing on a stepladder arranging some ivy, and when he said, "Here's my waistcoat," she gave a loud wail of self-pity at this new infliction. Father said in a bothered way, "What is the matter with you, Vinny? What are you doing up on that ladder? Here's my waistcoat, I tell you, and it's got to go to the tailor at once." He insisted on handing it up to her, and he banged the front door going out. Early in the afternoon, the snow changed to rain. The streets were deep in slush. We boys gave up sliding downhill on the railroad bridge in East 48th Street and came tramping in with our sleds. Before going up to the playroom, we looked in the parlor. It was full of small folding chairs. The big teakwood armchairs with their embroidered backs were crowded off into corners, and the blue velvety ottoman with its flowered top could hardly be seen. The rubber tree had been moved from the window and strategically placed by Miss Craigman's harp in such a way that the harp would be in full view, but Miss Craigman would not. Going upstairs, we met Julie coming down. Her lips were blue. She was pale. She passed us with fixed, unseeing eyes, and when I touched her hand, it felt cold. Looking over the banisters, we saw Miss Craigman arrive in her galoshes. Sally Brown, who was usually gay, entered silently later. Miss Craigman clambered in behind the rubber tree and tuned the majestic gold harps. Mother was arranging trayfuls of little cakes and sandwiches and giving a last touch to the flowers. Her excited voice floated up to us. There was not a sound from the others. At the hour appointed for this human sacrifice, ladies began arriving in long, swishy dresses which swept bits of mud over the carpet. Soon the parlor was packed. I thought of Sally, so anxious and numb she could hardly feel the piano keys, and of Julie's icy fingers plucking valiantly away at the strings. Then Mother clapped her hands as a signal for the chatter to halt. The first hesitating strains of music began, and someone slid the door shut. When we boys went down to dinner that evening, we heard the news, good and bad. In a way, it had been a success. Julie and Sally had played beautifully the whole afternoon, and the ladies admired the harps and applauded and eaten up all the cakes. But there had been two catastrophes. One was that although Miss Craigman herself had been invisible, everybody had kept looking fascinatedly at her feet, which had stuck out from the rubber tree, working away by themselves, as it were, at the pedals, and the awful part was she had forgotten to take off her galoshes. The other was that Father had come home during a sweet lullaby, and the ladies had distinctly heard him say, "Damn," as he went up to his room. This is the end of Part 9 of Life with Father by Clarence Day. In the next video, we will proceed to the next story entitled Father Sews on a Button. Thank you for listening.